Hi, this is Jeff Castman with Catholic Men of America. Welcome. Today, I've got a great guest. We're going to talk about some really interesting stuff, as always. Eamonn Clark, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your faith background, family, education, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I grew up in the U.S., lived all around, kind of hopping around. My father had, different work assignments, was moving every couple of years or so. Lived in France for a while as a young child, so I was very comfortable with, international stuff from a young age. And had a really good experience of my parish in high school. And my parish then they were doing confirmation preparation and confirmation in high school for whatever reason, in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, which is now thankfully kind of changing that. But for me, at least in the micro, it was a really good thing. So I had grown up as a Catholic, but kind of really became involved after that experience. I went to seminary for a while with Baltimore. Was in Emmitsburg for 5 years, university and at the seminary. Didn't work out with Baltimore. Decided I would come to Rome just to finish, the STB or whatever, just to get the degree and then go somewhere else. And here I am 10 years later, still in Italy. They say DC is a swamp. Rome is also a swamp. So I'm becoming a Roman swamp monster, as it were. So finished the STB, finished the STL, and now I'm almost done with the STD, writing on Pius XI's social teaching. So it's a doctorate in moral theologies, concentrating on social teaching, especially Pius XI's great social encyclical Quadragesimo Anno. So that's a little bit about my background. And
for people who don't know all of the designations, STL is a licentiate.
That's the license. Yeah. So the STB is the Vatican accredited bachelor's in theology degree, and it's a really an entry level program. Been at the Angelicum. That's been a really good experience overall. To be given the gift of Dominican education, and especially to be around individual professors. The program is the program, and Rome is sort of a factory. Bishops send their men here and they just want them to go through. But it's really this sort of thing where if you want a lot out of the education, you can get it. You just have to do the reading, to meet with professors, after class or whatever, and really dig into it. Even though the classroom rigor is not known to be the best in Rome, period, outside of very particular programs. But it's been an excellent education overall, very, very well ordered, integrated, pretty well. And yeah, I could recommend it to anyone looking for a way to, go a little bit deeper.
And so the licentiate is necessary for people who want to be able to teach theology. And who's normally someone that would be seeking that? What kind of a person or professional would say, hey, I want an STL?
Yeah, so as a layman, I'm very conscious of being a kind of parasitic upon the Roman system. It's a system that's absolutely built for clergy and sort of built for religious, but it's really a program that's designed for seminarians and priests. Like that is the normal kind of individual who's in this program. There's some lay students, and it's been kind of growing in the past 10 to 20 years or so. It's not really weird anymore. It used to be really weird, but there's been an uptick in that. And these are people usually are looking to try to teach in a seminary, or they want to go for a doctorate and they want to do more advanced research, or they're just looking for a good experience that could prove valuable down the road. So that's a bit about the degree. It's accredited through the Vatican, and if you study through one of the degrees in Rome, it's also in the Italian state system or the EU system on the Bologna Accords. That's my understanding. So if you're trying to teach in Italy or I guess in other places in Europe, those degrees are also respected in that way.
And then the STD is a doctorate in sacred theology. Correct. And so people who want to teach at a higher level would pursue that. But also my
Yeah,
understanding,
of course. It's the terminal degree. An STL lets you in the door. Like you're not really supposed to be teaching theology in a seminary if you don't have the STL. Um, Maybe some exceptions, but that's the normal, minimum requirement. But, if you want to be taken seriously and like actually have, a reasonable chance breaking into the world of academia, kind of at all, especially as a layman, you need the doctorate. So that's what it's there for.
and my understanding is that today every potential candidate for Episcopal consideration would have to have a doctorate as well.
It's sort of, yeah, it's more or less required. It's maybe not a strict canonical requirement, but it's basically like if you don't, it's like a bass guitar, nobody cares that you have it, but if you don't have it, it's like something's not quite right. What's going on there? So yeah, it's more or less required. At least in the US it would be. Not that that's in my career path or anything, but
Yeah. Yeah, but you can kind of look at potential candidates for the episcopacy down the road, and they're always going to have a doctorate in canon law or in philosophy or theology or more than one.
yeah, almost always. Yeah.
And okay, so you've moved from Baltimore to Rome. You've kind of become a Roman in some sense. You're still there. You're pursuing a doctorate. Um, Is this just your life from this point on, or what are your plans?
Yeah, so plans come and go, right? I've actually tried to leave Rome probably 4 or 5 times. Tried to go here, tried to go there, tried to go back to the US. I was supposed to teach in a seminary in Nigeria, and then COVID happened, so that proved to be a little too difficult. Was gonna try to move to Norway at one point, that fell through. So, I've been making all kinds of plans. They don't necessarily always happen. But in the past, I guess, year or two, I've really been getting into the idea of social enterprises in view of supporting the church in the mission. So if you're not familiar with how Rome is as a student, there's the universities, the schools, and then there are the colleges. And the colleges are where people live. You can get your own apartment, and that's easy enough. I mean, it's not easy, but there's an open market. But I've lived in several clerical houses or colleges, and that's kind of how I really became familiar with how things are in deep Africa, or some of these other places that people hear about, but it's like, no, I've lived with priests from this country. So Malawi is a place where I got really interested in, and I decided I was going to do this fundraiser for a clinic in Malawi because I was living with Malawian priests. I was talking about Malawi issues, and I was looking for a way to kind of, do some philanthropy. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run 100 miles, like nonstop. And I'm going to try to raise, a couple $1,000s for a clinic in Malawi. So I did. I ran from Rome to Assisi. I was awake for 45 hours, and it was super successful. But then I said, I want to be more responsible and generous than that. What I really want to do, and my dream, is to try to build commercial systems in the missions in order to support operations like this, like clinics or schools. Because if you're just getting handouts all the time, you create dependence. You create this kind of mentality where it's like, oh, we just get money, and maybe one day you don't get money, and then you're kind of in trouble, right? So that's sort of the dream, is to go all in on that, is how to build companies or revenue generating projects in mission territories. Another area I was in, like it was December in 2024. I was down in South Sudan, deep in the jungle in South Sudan, doing something similar, looking at how could I get things out of this crazy place that could support the good work that my bishop friend is doing in South Sudan. So that's sort of where my heart is, it's where my mind is, it's where my attention's been for a while. And looking to do more stuff like that.
So you, in your time in Rome, you've gotten to know a lot of seminarians and priests, and those guys have gone on to become priests of influence or even bishops. And in that process, you've become aware of kind of the challenges that they face in their society, their economic systems, the woes of their poor parishes and poor dioceses. And so you've got a dream potentially of helping them out,
Absolutely.
and not just by running 100 miles or
Yeah,
whatever it was.
unsustainable athletic projects. I have another one coming up for Nigeria. But yeah, I can't just be doing crazy athletic stunts all the time.
Well, tell us about one of these projects in particular that you've already done a lot of research and work on. What the circumstances are, opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, so a lot of people know, and some viewers may know, I was just in Pakistan, and that's a project that I've been thinking about for a couple of years. And the thing there, it's so funny. I was talking with a friend of a friend who's a parish priest around Islamabad, and I was saying, Father, like, how can we get some revenue going, in your tiny little town for your small parish? And it's like, well, we could open a beauty salon. So, well, I don't know about that, Father. I don't think I can find international investors for a beauty salon in the outskirts of Islamabad. And I said, Father, what about this mine where there's this pink salt, this Himalayan pink salt? He said, oh yeah, that's in my parish. I said, Father, that's what we're going to do. So I went to the famous Himalayan pink salt mine in Pakistan just in January. Was hanging out with there's a whole Christian enclave in the town, so there's essentially a Christian ghetto, and that's how Christians typically live in Pakistan. They live in their own little enclosed neighborhoods or ghettos. Was hanging out there with people who work in the mine or who do carving or cutting of blocks and this kind of thing. Met with a couple bishops, met with a nuncio, and toured around Islamabad, toured around Karachi, where everything would ultimately be shipped out of. And it was an incredible experience. Produced a 2-hour plus long documentary on the whole thing. It was just so eye-opening. The things you would never ever expect. You got to go to these places to learn how things really are. For example, I was in Karachi, and one of the parish priests there was explaining to me, like, we actually turn people away when they're seeking baptism. The reason is most of them are spies. They're trying to cause trouble. They're trying to show up, get baptized, and then say, look, Imam, he's trying to convert the Muslims, and then they'll burn the whole neighborhood down. So it's like 1 in 1,000 people who are Muslim who are requesting baptism actually end up going through. So stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily know or really understand unless you're there and you can talk with people. So it was a really eye-opening experience in that way, for sure.
So it's less than 2% of the population of Pakistan are Christians, and they face a lot of persecution, violent persecution,
Yes.
incarceration, torture, death. Pretty terrible situation. So how do Catholics live on just a day-to-day basis as a Catholic in Pakistan? I mean, are they being hunted down? Are they open to practice their faith? What does that look like?
Yeah, again, they think the Pakistanis, they think in terms of the group, right? So there's enclaves, there's Christian enclaves, and basically you don't find Christians living outside of these neighborhoods unless they've somehow become super wealthy. So there's neighborhoods in Islamabad, which is the safe city, because it's the capital, very highly policed, militarized, all of this. It's a relatively safe place. There's no, hunting or anything like this. Everyone knows there's the cathedral, there's, the Christian enclave. The dangers happen when there are accidents or, someone's trying to cause trouble, like a spy who gets baptized or something like this. But I'll give you an example of priest friend in Karachi who one day there was some pages of a Quran that were burned that were near the edge of the neighborhood. And so the suspicion was someone in this neighborhood did this to insult the prophet, right? So then all of a sudden there were like 60 imams, crying for blood. And my priest friend and another friend, they were there trying to calm everyone down. And the police came. They said, you got to come with us right now. You're going to be killed. So they did. They got to the police station. All the imams, like 60 imams, they're all, rioting at the police station. It's like, no, stop. We don't know who did this. And he was able to calm them down and say, if you find him, you bring him to me, and then, you can do what you want, but we don't know who did this. And they were, pacified that way. So that's sort of the challenge, is if one person makes a mistake, everybody pays. Or even if it looks like someone makes a mistake or does something wrong, everyone pays. The group pays. It's group versus group. That's the reality there. Some of the more violent cities, there's maybe a little bit more antagonism, but it's mostly the group on group dynamic. Then in terms of employment, very difficult to get a real job, street sweeping or, cleaning. This is easy enough. But if you want like a career, very hard, very, very hard. Because as I learned when I was there, you have to identify on your passport or whatever, all your official papers, what your religious affiliation is. So there's no hiding. There's no like clandestine Christianity. You have to say up front, I'm a Christian. And then immediately, you're not getting an interview. They're just going to immediately put your CV away and on to the next candidate. So it's really, really difficult in that way, even for the few who are well educated. So that's sort of the situation.
And then what happens with those that are well educated or are affluent? You hinted that there might be a difference in society for those people.
Yeah, they all try to get out. They're all trying to get out. No one wants to stay. If they can get out, they get out, because there's just really no upward mobility. There's really no opportunities. And the reality is, if you do somehow become wealthier in Pakistan, you're going to be funding a lot of families. You're not just going to be funding your own, because everyone's going to be asking for favors. Everyone's going to have problems. And if you make it, you're going to be responsible for those people as well. So there's a lot of incentive. If you get over the line for a visa, you're gone. So you really don't find many wealthy Christians in Pakistan. Maybe there's a few, but it's not really a reality there.
What's the economic circumstances like? Give us a sense of what it means to be poor.
You're living in a room about this size, maybe with like 4 or 5 other people. Your water source is contaminated by who knows what kinds of diseases. You're living in the bottom of a floodplain. You might have some pita bread in the evening, and that's kind of what you're eating for the day. Maybe you're street sweeping. If you're a woman, you're not working at all. That's very dangerous. You just kind of have to do domestic chores. And that's sort of your life. You wake up, you hustle and grind for what you can. You keep your head down, and you live in squalor. And I went around some of the slums in Islamabad. They're filthy, and what you don't get from the video is the smell. These are really, really tough places to live. But once you're inside, it's relatively peaceful. It's a tight community. Everyone knows each other. Everyone is looking out for each other as a member of the group, right? So that's the reality there too. You're living in real tight quarters with a lot of people, and no health, sanitation. It's rough. It's rough.
Do these Christian folks even have access to a physician?
Yeah, there's healthcare available, but it's not it's not what we would consider healthcare, access as Americans. Very, very limited, and the thing that happens is if you do really need a surgery, if your son or daughter, absolutely has to have, I don't know, a kidney removed or something like this, whatever, they have to have something serious done. You have to pay for it somehow. And what you're going to do is you're going to take out a loan from someone who is part of a system where, when you cannot pay back the money, you're going to go to a brick kiln, okay? And your family's going to go with you. You're going to go work in a brick kiln making bricks for the rest of your life, because you'll never be able to make enough bricks to pay off the debt. And so then your children will be making bricks, and their children will be making bricks, and their children will be making bricks, until someone in their goodwill decides they want to free you. And there's some groups that are doing that, but it's really complicated because that's a whole industry now. So it's not as simple as showing up and saying, hey, I'll pay the $100, which, you know, is about what it costs to free someone, because now you're cutting into that person's brick business. And now you're responsible for teaching this person how to live in society, for where to house them, how to clothe them, how to get them integrated. It's really more complicated than it looks. So
your idea here is you've identified a resource inside the parish of a priest who's an acquaintance of yours. How do the Christians have rights to this resource, this salt? And I think all Americans now know what pink Himalayan salt is about. So I get that kind of idea, but how? Just tell us what the idea is.
Yeah, basically, I want to get the dream for Pakistan with the pink salt is to have a fully integrated, you know, warehouse where we're doing cutting, we're doing packaging, we're, you know, sourcing all the materials locally if we can, for export, for, you know, custom purchase orders, supplying, you know, large food distribution companies, this kind of thing, to employ Catholics, or at least Christians, you know, so that they have somewhere to work that isn't going to, you know, discriminate against them. They're producing wealth. They're not just having it redistributed to them. They're doing something that people actually want to pay for. And then on top of this, some of the profit margin will go to, you know, the local bishop or the bishop's conference or whatever ecclesiastical entity makes sense. A lot of Dominican friends there, they might, you know, be able to benefit as well. So that's a whole system that's, you know, sustainable, it's self-contained, and it's operational. That's some ways off, you know, there's some stages before we get to that, but that's the dream, that's the idea, because they're never running out of salt. Like the mine is gigantic. I forget how much, it's like millions of tons that's there. They'll never run out. So functionally, it's an endless resource, and the government sells it, you know. Obviously, there's a complicated web of middlemen, and like, you're not going to get the best price, like, you know, you're just not, right? But it's an open access mine. You know, you show up, you say, I want to purchase this. This is how much. This is where it's going. Boom, 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 and they sell it to you. And I met with the, you know, the director of the depot in the mine. I sat there. We talked about stuff. You know, there's Catholics working in the mine. You know, when you watch the film, you'll see us talking about stuff. And, you know, I have a local contact there who's an accountant. He's been doing exports a while. His name is Zahid. And he's going to help take care of us. You know, he's all in on this, right? And so it's the kind of thing where, you know, you just have to build the relationships up and the knowledge up over time, accepting that you're going to have extra expenses because it's a complicated industry. It's a persecuted religious minority. Word will get out that this is what we're doing. And it just comes with the territory, you know, with something like this. So
the idea is to buy this salt in some sort of bulk capacity, make it available to the Catholics or Christians in the community, and then they cut it up and so forth, and then it would be packaged and shipped where?
Well, the U.S. is a great market. It's not the only market, but of course it's easy to do business in the U.S. So that would be probably the first market we would try to sell to. But before that, you know, because there's so many steps, there's a lot of costs involved with setting up something like that. The first thing we're trying to do is just a turnkey, you know, so fully third-party managed, co-packer and all of this, just bath salt. So pink salt, you know, Himalayan pink salt for, you know, spa stuff, because it's, you know, you can mark up the price quite a bit for a spa item versus a food item. or versus like industrial salt, and it's used that way as well. Basically, it's a very high margin item. That's the idea. And the kind of person who buys bath salt, I think, will really resonate with the social mission. And then, unlike I don't know, a lamp or whatever, you're going to use it, and you're going to use it really quickly. Unlike culinary salt, which could take a month, or whatever. You're going to put that into your bath, it's done, right? And you're going to have to buy another one, right? Or you can have a subscription. So that's the first model that we're looking at, is turnkey bath salt just in the US. And that way we start to build revenue. And then basically we claw our way back into Pakistan. We set up something there, and it just grows over time in that way, step by step, as it's sustainable.
Is this something where you're going to be able to compete in the marketplace in terms of price, or is it going to have to be, excuse me, is it going to have to be, premium priced because of the nature of the project?
At the start, especially for the specialty, bath salt type stuff, it's gonna come at a premium, and the more we can leverage the social impact, the better, I think. And I think a lot of people will be willing to say, you know what, I'm gonna spend the extra $2.50 because I know that this is helping someone. This is helping some 19-year-old girl in rural Pakistan make a living, who's not going to have another way, And so I think the challenge is how best to communicate that within the market that looks for these kinds of products. And I'm an educated man, but I don't know very much about the women's, spa and beauty space. So I definitely need a lot of help, and I've been getting some. But yeah, that's the challenge. I think it's mostly a marketing challenge at the start, and later it's a logistical challenge, trying to set up an operation in Pakistan. But it's not so expensive. I was in Karachi. Like, it's not actually as difficult as you might think, especially if you get support from the military, which sounds weird, but if you get above a certain level of business in Pakistan, you have to have a military sponsor. The military really runs the country. And I met with, some people who could be helpful for that, and they'll just kind of leave it there.
So you obviously are well networked. You've got priest friends, some bishop friends or acquaintances there. You mentioned the nuncio. But do they have any influence at all in the country?
Absolutely. So I met in particular with Cardinal Coots. Cardinal Coots is now retired Archbishop of Karachi, and he's highly respected. He had the funeral. He's telling me about the funeral he had of a sister, Ruth Fow, who had a state funeral, right? So the thing about the church in Pakistan is, like, there are these flashpoint figures, and especially the legacy of the missionaries, like the missionaries who set up schools. Everyone likes them because they did something good that benefited everybody. And so, to anchor something around someone like Cardinal Coots, not that he's endorsed this or anything like that, but there are figures like that who are around. There's another priest I know who, has won, I think, the highest award you can win as a foreigner. So it's a little bit more complicated than, like, Pakistan versus Christians. It's weirder and more complex than that, the way that it fits together. So there definitely are clergy who can be visible with this, who can make inroads, in different ways. But it is a heavy lift. It's not something that's easy. You know what I mean? But no, just because a bishop is involved, it doesn't mean it's going to be attacked. It's more like, are you taking economic opportunities away from Muslims? That's maybe where it becomes a little bit more sensitive. But the thing is, it's really only the uneducated Muslims who are like that. The more educated they become, like, the less that they're interested in any, troublemaking. That's kind of the dynamic. So that's what I could say about that without getting way into the weeds.
Yeah, it's a large country, and there are a lot of uneducated Muslims out there, especially in the rural parts of the country. So could be challenges down the road, but one step at a time. So how would you, there's a lot of cultural problems. What about the corruption aspect of this? Because in every third world, there's just layers upon layers of corruption. It's not just about paying somebody a little bit. Their bureaucratic processes that you have to go through and obstacles. And have you given that some thought?
Yeah, I mean, if I could just fix the corruption problems in Pakistan, that would be, I wouldn't be sitting around. That would be a great thing. I don't know the answer to that. Again, there's just so many unknowns that I think slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's a Hollywood saying. I think it applies here. Like, just get to know people, and over time, you learn what's what and who's who and where things are and what extra costs are really unavoidable and which ones you can't avoid. So it's definitely a difficult country, but there's a route there. They know that they have a good natural resource. They want to sell it. I mean, that's the thing, is it's a massive stream of revenue for the government. So they're not trying to protect it in that way. They're trying to sell it. Okay. So
yeah. So what is your practical plan right now? What is it that you're trying to do?
Yeah, so I've publicly announced I'm trying to set up a nonprofit to help manage these sorts of projects. So that's in the works. That's more in the theoretical stage at this point, trying to learn about how that would be set up, and is it going to qualify as a religious nonprofit or what? So just learning a lot about how nonprofits work. And then I'm thinking about trying to visit a couple places that I haven't gotten to go to yet, where I have other opportunities like this, just so I can get my feet on the ground, get a sense for things, take some footage, and find the right partners to be involved with those projects. One is really interesting out in the Pacific. Got to get down to Malawi. Yeah, there's a few other projects that are not easy, but are kind of right in my face. So I want to go take a look at them. So I'm looking for corporate sponsors to help fund just the travel. The actual lodging is not so difficult, but if you take a look at the 2-hour documentary I did, I would do similar stuff like that. And if Acme Inc. Wants to sponsor that, I'd be happy to pump them in the video and say, this is sponsored by Acme Inc. Check them out. Here's the link. It's just about the plane tickets. Flying to the Pacific is not it's not in a grad student's budget. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, and to show like what's going on in these places and how the church is and how things move. Hopefully over time will attract enough of a base to where we can really launch this nonprofit well and correctly. So that's the hope. That's sort of the 6 to 9 month plan. And yeah, I'm really looking for some good partners for that.
So you presumably with a nonprofit, you'd be able to take donations, maybe some grants and other things that might be available to help with that economic development, and then corporate sponsors that might get some visibility for what you're doing and help out with travel. Is this operation in Pakistan ever going to be profitable in the kind of American capitalistic sense of it, or would all of the revenue be consumed by, let's face it, the insatiable needs of the community?
It's not going to be Google, and I want to be clear that it's not the kind of thing where, like, if you're looking to have a nice investment portfolio, this is not for you. This is something to do if you want a high impact and potentially medium return investment, and it'll be investable down the road, not today. Today we're just looking for donations just to get things up and moving. I've been running a fundraiser for that. But it's not going to be profitable in like the normal American sense. I don't think. It's too heavy. It's too logistically complicated. And then we're going to have a profit margin, and some of that's going to go to the church in Pakistan, right? So that's kind of built in. But it's the sort of thing where, this is the sort of thing that the popes have been asking for, not in these words, but if you read the encyclicals, like, this is the kind of thing that they all want. It's like, if you're a man of means, you can take the extra risk, the extra liability, the extra work to go to these places to build the connection into the global market. You really should be trying to find ways to do that. So I'm trying to provide that opportunity to, wealthier Catholic businessmen to get involved in a responsible way, but it's not something to put everything into. Don't bet it all on black. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what do you think is kind of the minimum necessary budget that you would need to really get something going, employ a handful of people, buy a supply, get your labels on things, get everything shipped to the United States, maybe somebody warehouses in their garage for you and, I don't know, sells it on Amazon or eBay or however that's going to work. How much money?
I mean, with the fulfillment part, because if it's a skincare product, something like this, it's got to be a certified facility. There's some laws there. Ballpark, I hesitate to put a number on it today, but with around $25,000 to $30,000, we could actually start moving things in Pakistan. With around $5,000 to $6,000, we can start a turnkey operation with a little bit of basic marketing, next week. So that's the rough ballpark, set of numbers that I could give.
And if this is not salt for consumption, I would think it'd be really easy to produce it and sell it if you're just dumping it in your bathtub, right? I wouldn't think there'd be a lot of. There might be.
It's not super regulated, nor is culinary salt. Actually, it's not as regulated as you might think. It's not milk, so it's relatively easy, for the food space, and then for the beauty space, it's not actually as compliance heavy as one might think. So it's a somewhat simple product. It's just about funding the facilities that have to handle it, and for now, because we don't have a facility, we have to use a third party. It's a little bit of an extra expense.
So could you, I'm just thinking outside the box here, could you do a one-time shipment of a bag or a box of this salt, just send it to John Doe in the United States?
Absolutely.
And kind of have that maybe fulfilled in a very casual way, and then through friends and family and so forth, kind of start to get this out, to people, get the word on the street, so to speak, and maybe start to get some people aware of it without having invested, in the operational aspect of it, but just a, proof of concept, you might call it, just to kind of show people, hey, here's what's available. Is something like that possible?
It is, and you can do a 20-foot container even. It's not as expensive as you might think. It's not like, $15,000 or whatever. It's not unreasonable. But even just a pallet, it's not all that expensive. Again, I don't want to put numbers on it today, just in case I misspeak and someone, like, no, you said, but it's the kind of thing where if someone's able to receive it and they've got the proper minimum FDA, capabilities in their facility, very, very easy. It's not quite just pushing a button, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. There's a couple steps, but it's not as much work as you might think. Because again, they're trying to move this. They're trying to move it every day. I think they cut. I was being told you can see in the documentary. I'm trying to remember now though. It's like 70 tons a day they cut out of the mine, something like that. Or maybe it was 700. I can't remember. Whatever it was, it's just like a lot. I mean, it is a lot every single day. So it's the kind of thing where it's there, they're moving it, and if you just say, send some to us, you go to the office, you put in the order, and it's ready to go.
I know we've talked about a lot of different aspects of this. Before we wrap up, anything else you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the sweet spot between, you know, free market capitalism and philanthropy, in the way that it should be done in the Catholic world. You know, the church selling things to support itself is not a new thing. That's been done a very long time. But the idea of, you know, Americans going to the jungle to try to build systems that support dioceses that can't really support themselves, that's a little bit new. I won't say I'm the first one to do that, but it's not the kind of thing you see a lot of for various reasons. You know, people get into their career, you know, people settle down, they don't have the clerical network that someone like myself has. So it's missionary entrepreneurship. That's the branding I'm trying to give this whole thing. You know, we've had missionary discipleship, now we need missionary entrepreneurship, people going to these places that really need the help so that they can help themselves, and then support the mission of preaching and the sacraments and, you know, the maintenance of the Christian people.
Great work, Eamonn Clark. Thank you for being with me today. We'll share your links and your documentary and try to get the word out to help you. Folks, if you've been listening and you've been successful in your life, or you're interested in entrepreneurship, certainly a lot of opportunities here. There are a lot of ways that this could grow and be funded and be perpetuated. And certainly there's a valuable mineral resource here that is certainly in high demand in the United States, probably in other first world economies as well. Please consider taking a look at this. Eamonn, thank you for your time. God bless you.
Yeah, thanks so much.